This is macOS Ken.
A judge says Apple is a union buster. Significant OS updates for developers and users. And Apple's virtual assistant is going to virtual medical school. It is Thursday, the 22nd of June, 2023. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Use code macOSKen50 at factormeals.com/macOSKen50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Did you think all the talk around Apple retail and unions and union busting was all in the past? Turns out not. Engadget highlights a Bloomberg report that says the company has been taken to task by the National Labor Relations Board. According to the piece, an NLRB judge ruled Apple interfered with employees' organizing efforts at its World Trade Center store in New York City. Engadget says managers were found to have taken away pro-union flyers in the break room and attempted to dissuade employees from joining unions, which prosecutors argued had led employees to end the organizing campaign. And the judge has told Apple to knock it off. In a more formal, though not necessarily binding way. According to Bloomberg, the judge wrote that Apple should be required to cease and desist from coercively interrogating workers about their legally protected labor activism. It should stop confiscating pro-union literature in its break rooms and interfering with, restraining, or coercing employees in the exercise of their rights, according to the decision. You know, the word shall instead of should would have offered a bit of clarity. Apparently the NLRB can issue orders, though at least a couple of other entities can negate those orders. Quoting Bloomberg again, rulings by NLRB administrative law judges can be appealed to the board's members in Washington, and from there, the Federal Appeals Court. The agency has the authority to order changes to company policies, but not to hold executives personally liable for violations or to impose punitive damages. Jetting across the Atlantic, Apple is arguing against a major piece of legislation in the UK. The Times of London has the Cupertino company arguing against the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Bill, simplifying, perhaps oversimplifying the bill. The Times calls it a key piece of legislation intended to make sure technology companies do not damage competition. For its part, Apple says the bill threatens to create significant business uncertainty and will harm innovation. The company also says the bill gives Britain's Competition and Markets Authority sweeping, subjective authority without sufficient guardrails. Should the bill pass as is, the Times says it will give the regulator powers to fine companies deemed to have substantial and entrenched market power up to 10% of their global turnover for breaches of the new rules. It would also allow the authority to disqualify company directors. One of the executives expected to oversee tech under the bill says the organization will be focusing only on areas where there is substantial and entrenched market power already. The Times has Apple indicating that the CMA's mandate is too vague and that under the new regime, the authority's interventions could happen too quickly and without proper assessment. According to Apple, these conditions create an extremely volatile regulatory environment, risking significant disruption to the UK economy, including chilling investment. Off now to the subcontinent, where we find India eyeing the way Apple handles App Store payments. Apple Insider highlights a report from India's Economic Times. According to that, the Competition Commission of India, or CCI, is thought to be nearing the end of its App Store antitrust investigation. Watchers expect the governmental body to tell Apple it has to open the App Store to payment processing besides its own in-app payment system. Doesn't sound like the people who think so are involved in the case. Rather, they're working from recent precedent. In October of last year, the CCI directed Google to do that, allow third-party billing systems for payments on its App Store, rather than requiring the search giant's billing system to be used. Google is currently appealing that decision. No matter the ultimate outcome of the Google case, Apple would likely argue, as it has for years, that opening the App Store to third-party payment processors could jeopardize the privacy and security of its users. Meanwhile, Apple Insider points out the potential point of contention comes as India is working to increase production of Apple hardware. Of course, that benefits Apple as well. Additionally, it might be hard to argue that third-party payment plans are too much for Apple to bear. The report points out that Apple is thought to be preparing for a wider rollout of alternative payment systems in the App Store, as Europe's Digital Markets Act is expected to require it starting sometime next year. More news in a moment, but first a word from Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit and sponsor of today's show. I've told you about some of the great meals I've had from Factor, like the ranch baked chicken with cheesy broccoli rice and roasted mushrooms, and the broccoli cheddar ground beef. Both were great, and both were super quick. I do 10 minutes in the oven, but 2 minutes in the microwave would do it too. Well, Factor has new options for you to try. Surf and turf, or surf and surf, with great-sounding meals like roasted garlic filet mignon and shrimp, or Cajun spice shrimp and salmon. You can feel good about the seafood since the seafood in Factor meals is sustainably sourced. And did I mention that every meal that I have had from Factor has been great? Try them and see. Head to factormeals.com/macOSKen50 and use code macOSKen50 to get 50% off your first box. That's code macOSKen50 at factormeals.com/macOSKen50 to get 50% off your first box. Taste what has made Factor America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Get 50% off your first box with code macOSKen50 at factormeals.com/macOSKen50. Big day for Developers Wednesday, and thus for us all at some point. Pieces from 9 to 5 Mac say Apple has released the second developer betas of iOS 17, iPadOS 17, macOS 14 Sonoma, watchOS 10, tvOS 17, and the second Studio Display 17 firmware beta. All fun, nothing earth-shattering. No, the earth-shattering thing is for your face. A whole other piece from 9 to 5 Mac says Apple on Wednesday released the visionOS SDK. That would be the developer kit folks will use to make applications for the Cupertino company's mixed reality headset, Apple Vision Pro. Starting today, Apple said yesterday, Apple's global community of developers will be able to create an entirely new class of spatial computing apps that take full advantage of the infinite canvas in Vision Pro and seamlessly blend digital content with the physical world to enable extraordinary new experiences. With the visionOS SDK, Apple continues, developers can utilize the powerful and unique capabilities of Vision Pro and visionOS to design brand new app experiences across a variety of categories, including productivity, design, gaming, and more. More? More like what? Yeah, don't think I've lost your emails. I asked you earlier this week to send me your thoughts on what you want Vision Pro to be, the kind of paces you would like to put it through. Thanks to everybody who's written in so far. Let's go ahead and take one more day on that. If you haven't yet, send your thoughts to info@macosken.com. And now, where were we? Right, we were having a vision. A visionOS SDK really doesn't mean a lot without visionOS. A piece from Mac Rumors says developers got that as well, with Apple debuting the visionOS 1.0 developer beta. While developers can run a sort of simulation of the operating system now, the real fun starts next month. Mac Rumors says Apple in July plans to open developer labs in select countries around the world, and some developers will be able to apply for development kits to test apps directly on Vision Pro. Hey, is it too late to become a working developer in the next 30 days? Asking for me. Future OS updates weren't the only ones that got love and support from Cupertino midweek. 9to5Mac says Apple patches 2 actively exploited security flaws with iOS 16.5.1 and more. A lot more, actually, with updates going all the way back to iPhone 6s and iPad Air 2. Basically, if you've got an Apple device made in the last 8 years or so, you've got security updates that you need to apply. If you would like to know more, we'll dig deeper into those on checklist number 333, brought to you by Secure Mac. You can find that at securemac.com/checklist or wherever you get podcasts. Patching security holes weren't the only task for Wednesday's updates. They also dealt with a dongle. You may remember a problem that arose with the release of iOS and iPadOS 16.5. A piece from 9to5Mac said soon after they were released that those OS updates seemed to break compatibility for the Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter made by Apple. Meant to provide ports for charging devices and moving data. After the update, the device did neither, leaving a dongle that simply dangled. Well, good news. In addition to plugging the aforementioned security holes, the piece from Mac Rumors says iOS and iPadOS 16.5.1 restore compatibility between affected devices and Apple's Lightning to USB camera adapter. And finally today, paging Dr. Siri, maybe. The site Patently Apple says the Cupertino company has updated the trademark for its virtual assistant to cover health. Well, health, fitness, exercise, and wellness sensors, monitors, and displays, assistive listening devices for the hearing impaired, hearing enhancement products, acoustic apparatus, and this list just goes on. It's like a full page of that. According to the site, whenever a company wants their trademark to be extended to cover new features than originally filed for, they must file a new application to add a new international class. Patently Apple figures the filing means Apple's virtual assistant will at some point, maybe with iOS 17, expand its database to be able to intelligently respond to specific questions related to health matters. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Factor. Use code macOSKen50 at factormeals.com/macOSKen50 for 50% off your first box. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.